back to another episode of Handloader TV. I'm your host, Jeremiah. And in this episode, we're doing something that's a whole lot of fun. We're going to be working up loads, doing a full load development on this Marlin 1894 Trapper chambered in 44 Magnum. An outstanding cartridge, the brainchild of Elmer Keith and some excellent engineers at Smith & Wesson, but I'm not going to get into the history of that just yet. Or at all, and for time's sake in this video, we're going to focus on the meat and potatoes here. If you do want to learn more about the history of the cartridge, who developed it, all the hands that played a role in it, as well as a lot of really good information on how to load for this cartridge, go ahead and check out Handloader Magazine, issue number 359. And there's a pet loads feature in there by Brian Pierce, and he'll walk you through everything you need to know about loading the 44 Magnum. And this video really just goes along with that, as well as giving us an overview on the rifle that we have before us today. It's a really neat rifle. I'm personally a big fan of it for hunting, for self-defense. If you want a very legal truck gun for traveling across state lines, lever actions are absolutely phenomenal for that. And it makes an excellent saddle gun as well, which is what I primarily use this rifle for. Hence the big suppressor on the end of it. It's a little bit nicer on my ears and my horse's ears when I'm out there in the field and don't have time to put hearing protection on and I need to take a shot at something. So it's a neat rifle. Let's go ahead and dive into the nuts and bolts of it, and we'll talk about the specifications of it now. When it comes to lever guns, I can probably talk about them all day long, maybe even in the next week, but for this video, I'm going to try and keep it brief and just run you through the specifications and features of this rifle, just so you guys are aware. So starting out at the rear here, we have a very nice rubber recoil pad. The fit and finish on this guy is really good, and I'll be honest with you, I've already put somewhere in the neighborhood of 200, maybe 250 rounds through this rifle, just kind of seasoning the barrel, getting used to it, having a feel for it, so that way I know what I'm talking about when I film these videos. And the fit and finish is really nice, hasn't moved at all, hasn't slipped under recoil. Very, very nice fitment there. And that kind of matches the overall aesthetic of the rifle and the quality of the rifle. The fit and finish around the tang, where the stock meets the receiver, where the bottom of the tang, the lever sits, everything is really, really nice. The fit and finish is phenomenal, in my opinion, especially for a production rifle. And Marlin was recently purchased by Ruger, and Ruger's really done a great job of stepping up the quality control on these guys, making sure that it's ready to go and looks good before it leaves the factory, and they've done a great job at that. So then rolling along, we have a forend and a stock here, which is black laminate, according to the Ruger website. However, if you were to ask me, I'd say it looks more black and gray, kind of a salt and pepper two-tone kind of look. But that's what they call it on their website, is black laminate. We have some checkering at the wrist of the stock here and as at the forend up front there. Looks very nice, just machine checkering, but they did a good job on that. We have a nice overall matte finish here, and it looks really sharp with that black laminate stock there and forend. And then getting on over to the action side of things, it runs really smooth, clean, no complaints there with the action. Yeah, just feels about like a lever gun should. One thing I don't like is it does have a cross bolt safety here, which you can push from this side. It's on safe. Push it from this side, you'll see a little red mark on the other side. That means red, you're dead, red, ready to fire, whatever you like to use to remember that. But I'm not a big fan of cross bolt safeties, to be honest with you. I prefer to carry it in the traditional half cock position, which is what I normally do, and I don't even mess with the safety. And it's nice that they retain that half cock safety there. Big fan of that. And to top it all off, mounted up on top here, we have some very nice Skinner sights. We have a front blade that's made by Skinner sights, and then we have a rear aperture sight, which accepts replaceable apertures. And I've gone ahead and actually replaced this rear aperture to a smaller sized aperture, just since we're going to be doing a lot of target shooting. That made a lot of sense. The sight is rear adjustable for windage and elevation, and the front sight is fixed. So something to keep in mind there. In my experience in shooting multiple different loads and all that kind of stuff, the sight's got more than enough windage and elevation for just about any load you can throw through a 44 Magnum. So a really good sight option, and I'm a big fan of peep sights, personally speaking. And speaking of hammers and safeties, the trigger here, one thing I have noticed about it, and this is typical on a lot of lever actions, this is just me being nitpicky, but it does tend to rock back and forth. And that happens even at the half cock position, or whether the hammer is all the way back, or if the hammer is completely down. It still just tends to rattle around there a little bit. Just a little personal gripe of mine on handling the rifle, and something I've noticed on these Marlins. But that said, the trigger on this rifle is very, very good for a lever gun. On an average of 5 pulls on my Wheeler Engineering digital trigger pull gauge here, it broke clean and crisp at 3 pounds, 10 ounces. Now there was some over travel, and what I mean by over travel, and of course we are clear here, but when you depress this trigger to the rear and the gun goes off, the trigger can actually travel past where the hammer drops. So there's just a little bit of over travel, not as bad as I've seen in some lever guns, but definitely not the best at the same time. So something to keep in mind. All in all, I don't think it really affects field performance that much, but something I noted during my first 250 rounds through the rifle. We have a 16.1 inch barrel. It is 1 in 20 twist, right hand twist. And it is threaded on the end, 5/8 by 24, so it can accept a suppressor. What I have on the end here is from Anechoic. It's a wonderful suppressor. I'm a big fan of it. It definitely helps tame the recoil, but most importantly, it's very quiet with the suppressor installed. And let's see, what else do we have to cover here? The rifle overall length is 33.25 inches without the suppressor. With the suppressor, it adds about 6.5 inches. So not too shabby there. And the magazine tube has a capacity of 8 rounds of 44 Magnum or 9 rounds of 44 Special. If you shoot the smaller, shorter 44 Special cartridge, then you can actually fit 1 more additional round in the magazine tube, of course, plus 1 in the chamber there as well. As this rifle is currently configured with the butt cuff, with the 10 rounds of 44 Magnum and the suppressor, it weighs exactly 8 pounds. So it is very light, very handy, and it's a wonderful rifle to pack around in the backcountry, to take out on hikes. If I'm gonna go walk the dogs through the prairie or through the woods or something like that, this is a go-to rifle of mine. Just grab it and go. Carry it on horseback quite a bit. And I do have a sling for it from Simply Rugged, the same company that made this butt cuff. They make phenomenal leather products. Their holsters are top-notch. And these butt cuffs, or I think they actually call them cartridge cuffs, they are very thick leather, and that's one thing that's really nice about them. They're probably about twice as thick as a lot of the other competitors on the market, and as a result, they do kind of raise my sights, so I have a natural point of aim and a little bit better cheek weld behind these peep sights, and I do like that. And these sights do clear the suppressor. They are close, but you can just see over the top of the suppressor. It works just fine for me, and I'm able to use 6 o'clock holds and dead-on holds, no problem with the current sighting system with the current suppressor on, which is pretty important. So all in all, it's a pretty neat rifle with a lot of features. For a lever gun, I really like it. It does have sling studs fore and aft. That comes from the factory, so you can easily mount those things. But there you have it. That's the 1894 Trapper model from Marlin in 44 Mag. Let's go ahead and take a moment now to talk about the hand loading side of things and what I did to develop loads for this particular video so you guys can duplicate them. When hand loading for the 44 Magnum, it's important to take note of a couple of special considerations. And also, rather than walk you through step by step and show me loading hundreds of rounds, that's boring, we're just going to kind of talk you through exactly what we did so you guys can duplicate it on your own and you guys are better informed about what we did to achieve the results we get with this rifle. So I like to start out with the components that we selected. Right out the bat, we selected Starline cases. They are exceptional cases. They make an outstanding product. Very pleased with them. So we have brand new unfired Starline cases that we're going to be using for all the loads tested in this rifle. We have Redding reloading dies, which are of outstanding quality. I'm a big fan of them. We've got a shell holder. I believe this one's from Hornady. Didn't have my Redding handy, so I just threw that in there. High quality bullets, high quality powders that will achieve, for the most part, top-notch velocities with the exception of tight group. And Accurate number 7 is more of a middle-of-the-road powder, but it does perform very well in the 44 Magnum. So what we went ahead and did to assemble our loads is starting out with the new unfired Starline cases, as we went ahead and ran them all up through a full-length sizing die, Redding, just to iron out any dings or dents or anything that may have occurred during the shipping process and make sure all our cases are uniform for a fresh starting point. Then from there, once the cases were sized, I went ahead and expanded the case mouths using, again, a Redding expanding die. And how I like to do this, some people measure it, and it's kind of hard to measure crimp with a set of calipers, in my opinion. So what I like to do is I like to get it to where the bullet will just barely sit down in there. And I can't force it down because there's enough tension there to prevent me from forcing it down. But it sits nice and square in there, and no lube or no lead or copper jacket is going to get shaved off when I go to seat this bullet. And I like to apply, prior to seating a bullet, I like to apply a good chamfer and chamfer and deburr on the case mouth, so it has a little bit of shininess in there, and it just really makes a big difference when it comes to seating a bullet and preventing that lead or jacket from getting shaved off. From there, I went ahead and primed everything. I used an RCBS bench-mounted priming tool. I think they call it their automatic priming tool. Works really well, like that. And then I went ahead and charged each case with the appropriate powder and charge weight using an RCBS Matchmaster powder dispenser. All the charge weights were accurate to 0.04 of a grain. Then once I had a primed, charged case, I went ahead and took it over to the press again, and I would seat a bullet, and I would crimp it as a separate step. So I prefer to crimp as a separate step. So I would seat all of these bullets. I've actually got some lubricant, bullet lubricant up there in that seating die, got all over the bullet there. But I like to crimp as a separate step. I think it's important for overall accuracy of the load. It makes it a little bit more uniform. And also it ensures that if you do have a little bit of uneven length on the cases, you're not going to be seating a bullet deeper and changing your overall loaded length. And that's pretty important, especially if you're loading a long 4 cartridge bullet. So there you have it. That's pretty much everything I did to develop these loads for this Marlin 1894. Now, one thing that is a consideration, depending on what kind of powder you're going to be using, should determine what kind of primer you're going to be using. So if it's not a ball powder, a Magnum slow burning Magnum pistol powder, I use standard primers pretty much across the board. Accurate number 7, Hodgdon tight group, IMR 4227, you fill in the blank, CFE pistol. I use a standard large pistol primer in 44 Magnum. Now, if I'm going to step it up to something like H110, Lil Gun, Alliant 300 MP, then I will switch over to a Magnum pistol primer. And the 300 MP is kind of, I think it's kind of right on the cusp of needing one or not needing one, kind of like accurate number 9. Generally speaking, I don't use Magnum primers with accurate number 9. With 300 MP, it's hit or miss. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. I haven't done enough personal testing to verify that. But Brian Pierce talks about that in great detail in that Pet Loads article in Handloader issue number 359. I'd encourage you guys check that out, seek his wisdom out as well. Very knowledgeable hand loader, and I've learned a lot from reading his articles over the years. So there you have it. Now you know exactly what we did to develop our loads in this rifle. We're going to go ahead and take this rifle and hit the range and conduct some testing. And one final note on the testing procedure, we're going to test a ton of different loads. I think at this time I've got well over 300 rounds loaded up and 35 or 45 different loads that I'm going to put to the test. For the video time's sake, we're only able to show you a limited number of those loads. So I would encourage you guys to head over to our sister website, loaddata.com, type in Handloader TV, look for the Marlin 1894 44 Remington Handloader TV loads, and from there you can see everything that we tested, every load, the accuracy, standard deviations, what powder we used, all the components. You'll see all that for free. The only thing you won't be able to see is the powder charge weight. We reserve that for subscribers, and it's a great way to support the channel, and it funds what we do here at Handloader TV. So we appreciate all those who do subscribe, but nonetheless you'll get all the accuracy information for free, and you can make a better overall decision on how the rifle performed, and I think that's pretty important. That's what we're all about here, is unbiased testing, showcasing the results to you so you can make an educated and informed decision about what we've done, and maybe whether this rifle is right for you or not, or the cartridge. So with that, let's take the rifle, we'll hit the range, and we'll see how it performs. So as you can see, we're out here on the range now, and we've got the Marlin 44 Magnum benched in here. Target is downrange at 75 yards, which is where we'll conduct all of our shooting for today. Unless we get in some time on steel and shooting other things. According to the Kestrel 5700 here, the temperature is 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity is 41% and falling. And pressure, when adjusted for elevation, which is 5,000 feet, is 30.46. So a really nice day out here on the range. And to record all of our velocities, we have a Garmin Zero C1 Pro chronograph set up to record all those velocities. So what do you say we go ahead and get set up? We'll check and see how this rifle is shooting, check 0 on it, and then we'll start shooting groups with some hand loads that we've assembled for the 44 Magnum. And in addition to the hand loads, we also have some factory loads that we'll go ahead and put to the test and see how they perform. All right, so what I've gone ahead and done is fire 3 rounds at the paper, and with the factory 0, that's about where it hit, right up here. And so we're about 2 3/4 inches high and 2.5 inches to our right. So adjusting the sights on this lever action is actually extremely simple. What you're going to go ahead and do is get an Allen key. This is a 1/16 size standard Allen key. I'm going to loosen up this set screw here, and I'll just remove it for a moment. Then I'm going to go ahead and take out the aperture, because usually these are pretty snug from the factory. And then I'm going to slip an Allen key in here, and I'm just going to turn this sight. There's 1 revolution, and I think I might be able to get 1 more out of it. Yeah. But what I'm going to go ahead and do, there's 1, just turn it down 1 full revolution, get that nice and square. And then I'll go ahead and return the set screw to hold it in place. And one nice thing about these Skinner aperture sights is they are very easy to adjust, very easy to use. Very handy. That set screw is starting to bite. You don't want to over tighten it and strip out the thread. You just want that good and snug, so that way your aperture doesn't rotate while you're firing or while you're in the field. There we go. That looks pretty good. We'll see if that's not a little bit closer. And they're going to get some point of impact shifts from load to load. That's just to be expected. So prepare yourself for that. But this is rough zeroed with the load that I use quite a bit in 44 Magnum. And that's pretty much how you do it. I'll go ahead and return the aperture, which is a little bit tricky sometimes, but once you get it started, it goes in really smooth. Yep, there we go. And this particular aperture does have a rubber O-ring on it. And one real nice thing about that is under recoil, especially if you're shooting full power 44 Magnum loads, under recoil, it will keep that aperture securely in place, and it won't loosen up or back out on you. So that little O-ring in there is a very nice addition. Big fan of that. Then to adjust your windage, this particular Skinner Trapper sight has a screw up at the top here, and there is no set screw for that. So we'll grab an Allen key of appropriate size. Looks to be about this one. Yep, a 5/64. We can loosen that set screw up, or loosen the screw up here, just a smidge. That's nice and snug. And then we can drift our sight over as needed. So I'll go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll start shooting some groups on the paper, and we'll see how it does. So we've got the lever gun benched in, target's down there at 75 yards. The first load that we want to put to the test is actually using some factory loaded ammunition. This is double tap ammunition, 44 special, 240 grain hard cast. And the bullet style that they use is a semi-wad cutter. Let's go ahead and put a group on the paper and see how these guys feed, as well as how they group. Main reason why I wanted to put these to the test right out the gate is to see how well this lever gun feeds 44 special. Okay, so that was a pretty anemic working of the lever. In that case, extracted but did not eject. We'll work the lever with a little bit more authority. Yep, still did not eject. But still not too, it's still pretty weak on the lever. Okay, there we go. So if you work it with authority, it seems to function. Yep. One more. Yep. So if you work the lever with some authority, the 44 special ammunition functions just fine in this Marlin lever gun. Just something to keep in mind. Work that lever with cadence and authority. So up next, we're going to be putting to the test a hand load using Hodgdon tight group powder, an 11.5 grain charge with 180 grain Hornady XTP. Starline cases, Federal 150M primers, and our overall loaded length is 1.595 inches. Now this is a maximum load here, so use caution, work your way up to it. And if I rattled that information off too quick for you, don't worry, there'll be a target review with the load data on the screen at the end of this video, so stick around for that. But for now, let's settle in and shoot a group. Up next in our line of testing, we're using Accurate No. 7 powder, a 15.0 grain charge with the 200 grain Acme 44-200 round nose flat point that weighs 200 grains. It's high-tech coated and sized to 0.430 inches. Starline cases, Federal 150M primers, and our overall loaded length is 1.575 inches. I actually use this bullet quite a bit in Winchester 4440 lever guns because it just seems to work really well with those guys. And in addition to that, it works very well because of that 44 Magnum size. And those Winchester 4440s, they actually use about a 429 diameter bore. So works very well in those. Let's go ahead and see how well it actually works in a 44 Magnum lever gun now. We'll settle in, shoot a group. And ignore the diesel truck in the background. If you guys can hear that, I apologize. Very nice. The next load that we're going to put to the test is using Hodgdon H110 powder, a 23 grain charge with a 240 grain Hornady XTP. Starline cases, CCI 350 Magnum large pistol primers. Starline cases, our overall loaded length is 1.600 inches. Well, you guys know the drill. Oh, it's 5, right? Yep. There's all 5. All right, so we're putting to the test now Hodgdon H110 powder, a 19 grain charge with the 280 grain Swift A-frame bullet, CCI 350 large pistol, Magnum primer, Starline cases, and our overall loaded length is 1.600 inches. And there's our 5 rounds. At this point, we might have just a smidge of shooter fatigue coming in. I'm about, I don't know, 500 rounds into this rifle, and about 300 of those are just today alone. So I'm getting a little bit tired of it. The recoil's really not bad, especially with the suppressor on there, but it is starting to wear on me, and when you shoot all day, you're bound to get a little bit tired. So we're back from the range. We did a lot of testing with this rifle, testing a ton of different loads. At this point in time, I've probably got over 500 rounds through this particular rifle, maybe even 600. So I've got a real good idea of how the rifle performed, but let's go ahead and dive into the targets so you can see the results for yourself. And again, this is just a good overall representation of how the rifle performed. It may not be the best particular load, and it may not be the worst particular load. We're just kind of giving you an overall feel for how this rifle performs with a good load, because quite frankly, we don't have enough time to film every single load we test. So this is just a mix and match hodgepodge of all the loads that we tested throughout the process of evaluating this rifle. If you want to see all the loads, again, check out loaddata.com. Great resource, great website. You can see all that information with the exception of the powder charge, completely free of charge. So taking a look at the first target, this is actually a factory load loaded by Double Tap Ammunition. It is their 44 Special hard cast 240 grain loading, and this uses a semi-wad cutter style bullet. We got an average velocity of 1,006 feet per second, an SD of 6, and a group size of 2.88 inches with this particular load. And I kind of expected it not to shoot the best. Typically, you won't achieve the best accuracy with 44 special ammunition, but I really wanted to make sure this rifle would feed 44 special no problem, which it did. I put about maybe 50 to 60 rounds of 44 special through it, various different types, not just double tap, but some hand loads as well. And it performed very well. And out of all the factory ammunition tested, believe it or not, this performed the best. So there you have it. I was a little bit surprised to see that. Now we're going to go ahead and jump on over to the hand load side of things, starting out with Hodgdon tight group powder. This is an 11.5 grain charge, which is a maximum charge. We get a group size of 1.32 inches, an average velocity of 1,640 feet a second, and a standard deviation of just 14. So overall, really good results there with the 180 grain Hornady XTP. Those Hornady XTP bullets just seem to shoot well no matter what. They did something right when they designed the XTP. It's a phenomenal bullet, and that 180 grain projectile allows you to get some extra velocity and oomph out of it, even with a relatively fast burning powder like tight group. And the recoil is extremely mild with that lighter bullet as well. Then we went ahead and jumped on over to accurate number 7 with a 200 grain Acme 44-200 round nose flat point, high-tech coated, and size to 0.430 inches. We got an extreme spread of just 12, a standard deviation of 4, and an average velocity of 1,586 feet per second. And that grouped into 2.47 inches. So not too shabby, but that was one of the better targets that we got with this particular powder and bullet combination. And from what I remember, it's been some time now, but from what I remember, that was pretty typical with this powder and bullet combination as far as accuracy goes. And to be honest with you, as a whole, with a decent load, I think that's about what this rifle shoots. But we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Continuing on with our testing here, we switched over to H110 powder, a 23 grain charge with a 240 grain Hornady XTP. And with the H110 powder, we also swapped primers over to the CCI 350 large pistol Magnum primers. And the average velocity was 1,745 feet per second with a standard deviation of 9 and an extreme spread of 24. And this load grouped into 0.87 inches. And this is one of the best loads that we got with this rifle. And this rifle really seemed to like Hodgdon H110 powder for some reason. It was the dust that seemed to work and fill in all the imperfections in the barrel, and whatever you tried with Hodgdon H110 just worked. The target that I shot for sighting in this rifle, group 3 shots all touching, very similar to this, and it was using H110 powder and a really crappy home cast bullet that they were grade C's is what I consider, so they were not my top shelf premium cast bullets. They were just extras that I had laying around. For whatever reason, again, this rifle just liked H110. And normally I don't showcase 2 loads using the same powder. I try and provide some variety. However, since this rifle did like H110 so much, I went ahead and retested another load using Hodgdon H110, a 19 grain charge with a 280 grain Swift A-frame bullet, and again those CCI 350 large pistol Magnum primers. And we got a standard deviation of 13, an extreme spread of 40, an average velocity of 1,427 feet a second, and a group size of 1.54 inches. So there you have it. There's the results of all of our testing that we conducted in filming. But again, there's a lot more that we couldn't film, and you can head over to Load Data to see those. But this is a good overall representation of what this rifle is capable of and how it performed for us throughout testing. So you guys can be the judge. You can make an educated decision whether this is good in your eyes or bad. And before we close out this video, I'd like to leave you guys with some closing thoughts on the rifle and the loads as a whole. So before we dive into my final thoughts on the overall performance of the rifle and the loads, I want to preface this segment by saying this is just my own personal opinion. I'm not trying to sway you one way or another. Take my personal thoughts with a grain of salt. but we do try to showcase as best as to our ability what the rifle does, how it performs overall, and let you guys make an educated decision. We don't let advertising dollars, we don't let anything interfere with the end results of what we showcase here. And my personal thoughts on this rifle are just that. They're personal. They're my own thoughts and conclusions from putting about 600 rounds through this rifle. I've got some thoughts. So starting out, some of them I've written down here on a piece of paper so I don't forget, because there is a lot of things to cover, but the biggest thing that stood out to me is this particular rifle is a little bit picky. I've tried loads that performed well in other handguns and other .44 Magnum rifles, and they shot a lot better in those other rifles. But then on the same side, I had a couple of loads, in particular with Hodgdon H110, that shot way better out of this rifle. So this rifle seems to be, in my opinion, a little bit picky when it comes to the ammunition you choose to feed it, whether that be factory ammunition or hand loads. It seemed to really like Hodgdon H110 for some reason. It was about the only powder that would group sub 1 inch at 75 yards. So not even sub MOA, but these rifles, all in all, they are between 1 to 3 inch rifles at 75 yards, in my humble opinion. Can they do better than that with a good load? Absolutely. Absolutely they can in a good rifle. But this particular one, I'd say on average is anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 inches with a decent load. And I actually wanted to showcase more factory ammunition for you guys, but during testing, they just simply didn't shoot. Some of them I couldn't even showcase if I wanted to, because they didn't even hit the paper I was aiming at 75 yards. And I don't know whether to blame that on the rifle or Winchester or Remington, the ammunition I was trying. But that happens, and that's why I so strongly endorse hand loading. I think it's critical for the rifleman, the handgunner. I think you got to hand load to really see what a rifle is truly capable of. And that definitely proved true with this particular rifle, especially with it being as picky as it was. All in all, the rifle did perform very well though. In my opinion, for what it is, with a good load, it's more than acceptable. It is not preventing me from grabbing this rifle out of the rack and taking it in the field. A sub 1 inch group at 75 yards with H110, that's the powder that I typically use in .44 Magnum anyways. I've got thousands of rounds loaded up with that powder, and so it just so happened to work very conveniently for me. If I had thousands of rounds of a different load loaded up and this rifle didn't like it, that might be another story. So this might be some personal bias showing through. But all in all, it did perform within reasonable expectations. You can certainly use this for hunting. It is good out to 200 yards with a good load, no problem there. You do your due diligence, find out what your rifle likes. You can absolutely bag a whitetail, mule deer with this rifle, no problem, no questions asked. And for a self-defense rifle, especially in more restrictive states where things like AR-15s are not available, this is a phenomenal option, especially for home defense with the threaded barrel and the addition of a suppressor on here. It makes a phenomenal rifle. And it holds 8+1 rounds. That's not bad capacity, especially when you consider, if you're like me, you have a standard response to a threat and you shoot until that threat is neutralized. It's going to take a lot less rounds of .44 Magnum at close range than it would .223 Remington or .556 NATO to neutralize a threat. And that is something to keep in mind. I know I attend gun sight quite often, and they'll have a standard response, and it's based on what cartridge you're shooting. If you're shooting a .44 Magnum, you don't have to shoot them as many times as you do with, say, a .380 auto or even 9mm Luger, things like that. So something to keep in mind. I do really like the rifle for that idea. Also something that you can carry across state lines very easily. It's a great option for a truck gun for those reasons. And personally, I've carried a lever gun in a truck for a long time. Ever since I was a teenager, I always had it. And it went wherever I went, and whenever I got out of the truck, I had a rifle with me, and that was very handy for traipsing through the woods and scouting around and things like that. And I was grateful to have a rifle in many different instances. There's a lot of stories I could tell you about that, but I'll save those for another time. All in all, it's a very nice rifle, and I'm personally pleased with the results. But as always, we try to showcase the results. Don't let my personal bias sway you or my opinion sway you. You've seen the results. You can make an educated decision for yourself on how the rifle performed, how accurate it was. And I should note it was 100% reliable with 44 Special and 44 Magnum ammunition. No issues there. It does not feed snake shot. I did try that, but other than that, it feeds 100% reliable, and I don't think they're designed to cycle snake shot anyway, so that's a different story for a different time. Thank you guys so much for watching. We do greatly appreciate it, especially if you stuck around this long. I'd ask that if you liked what you saw, give us a thumbs up, let us know. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you're notified when we post our next video. And as always, leave your comments below. I read every single one of the comments that we get on these YouTube videos, and I do my best to respond to them. And at the end of these videos, I like to respond to them directly in video format since I don't have time to type out thorough responses. So we'll dive into that and close out the video with a couple of your own comments. All right, so I've got some of your guys' comments here pulled up on my phone. So I'm going to go ahead and start out and read through some of these. So starting out, and I apologize in advance for any names or handles that I butcher on here. I'm not the best at pronouncing things to begin with, and some of these are rather tricky, especially when reading them off a small phone screen. So bear with me as we go through these. But starting out, this is on our 280 Ackley Improved Hunting Loads video. This is from Brian Clammer, 3328. He says, what rate of twist would you recommend if I were to rebarrel a Savage 110 from 30-06 to a 26-inch heavy sporter contour Criterion in 280 AI? Thanks. So great question there, Brian. I personally would recommend a 1-in-8 twist. I don't think you're going to need any faster than that. And the 1-in-8 will stabilize pretty much everything that can be effectively shot out of the 280 Ackley Improved. There might be a few boutique bullets that would benefit from a slightly faster twist rate, but none that I can think of off the top of my head. And that's what my 280 Ackley is. It's a 1-in-8 twist rate, and it still works very well with the lightweight bullets. I've shoot a lot of 139 Barnes LRXs out of it, and I've shot the 168 LRX as well. They all work very well, and no issues with stabilization there. So 1-in-8 would be my personal recommendation, but if you have a favorite bullet, make sure it'll stabilize in that 1-in-8 twist. This one is on our 6.5 Creedmoor in an AR-10 favorite rifles and load video. This one is from Reloading Quest. He says, good shooting, bud. Nice rifle as well. So far, I am really liking the arrow match bullets myself. They're awesome in 6mm arc. It's funny that he says that. I'm loading up some arrow match bullets in the 6mm arc right now, working on that. They're great bullets. Great bullets. And they're reasonably priced, which I'm personally a very big fan of. So then in that same video here, this comes from 876 MPR. He says, I have a CZ 550A in 6.5 by 55 that will do anything a 6.5 Creedmoor will do, but I have nothing bad to say about it. Really great look and accuracy. Well, thank you very much for that comment. That is a very level-headed comment about the 6.5 Creedmoor. Yeah, there's really nothing wrong with the 6.5 Creedmoor, and there's definitely nothing wrong with the 6.5 by 55 Swede. And in a CZ rifle, that's probably a wonderful combination. So yeah, people love to hate on the 6.5 and hate to love on the 6.5, and the Creedmoor creates tons of controversy, but that was a level-headed response. And I see that out of you guys a lot in the comment section. You guys are very knowledgeable, very level-headed, just the facts kind of approach, and I really appreciate that. This is from Charles Mullins, 3238. And in this video, I talk about how my grandfather liked semi-automatic deer rifles. And he says, boy, my uncles and old fellers around here loved the 7400s and 742s. That was the auto rifle of the day. I just done a PA-10, which is AR-10, 18-inch 308J. Comparing to the DD, Daniel Defense 5V3, I kinda got spoiled. Setting in the woods now with my 6.5 PRC waypoint with a buffet of hand loads. I don't know which I want to try first. LOL. From 100 grain ELD VT, 130 grain Tip Game King, 140 grain SST, and the big 156 Elite Hunter. What do you think? Eastern Kentucky Whitetails. Well, by the time I reply to this, I posted it just an hour ago. It's going to be probably at least a few weeks from there. But if it was up to me, I personally always start with the lightweight bullets and work my way up. But I do that mostly because I'm always testing multiple loads and I like to keep everything in order. So try whichever makes you happy. That's what I say there. Thanks for the comment. I talked a lot about my grandfather liking semi-automatics, and it seems that I'm not alone in that experience. A lot of old timers really like those semi-autos, especially back east for hunting deer and things of that nature. They're definitely not the most accurate rifles out there. Ironically, my grandfather does have a 243 Winchester, and that will shoot, honest to goodness, under 3 inches, generally speaking. And that's pretty impressive for those rifles. But other than that, yeah, they'll hit a pie plate at 100 yards, or maybe a pie pan, a big pie pan. So this next comment comes from James Lee YW8HK. He says, that Model 7 is a great timber brush woods rifle, light and fast. And that was on Handloading the 260 Remington. He's absolutely right. That 260 Remington is a phenomenal brush gun, works great. Hunted with that a lot over the years, taken a lot of coyotes and deer with it. My first elk was taken with that rifle, like it or not, love it or hate it. And it did well. Single shot placement's key, performed. So thanks for taking the time to write that comment. Couldn't agree more with it. And let's see what else we have here, scrolling through what you guys are saying. This is from Mr. Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson 9989. This is on our favorite rifle and load. This is the 28 Nosler and early rifle bull elk. He says, congrats, well done. We need to hear the story from the wife and how she put the load together. I agree. That load, I can't take credit for. It was entirely my wife's load that she spent a ton of time working up. I think she tested 3 or 4 different powders, settled on Vitavori N565, 139 grain Barnes LRX bullet. It worked phenomenally well on the elk, and I'd love to get her in front of the camera, but she prefers to be behind the camera. She takes all the photos for my articles and things like that, and getting her in front of the camera is pretty tough. And time for one more comment. This is from Bustabrass 9025. He says, congratulations to your wife and to you on a great hunt and a magnificent harvest. I too ascribe to the light for caliber bullets hand loading philosophy. I was blessed to take a very good Wyoming muley a few days ago with my Weatherby 307 Range XP chambered in 280 AI. Using 120 grain Nosler ballistic tip and reloader 17 powder. Traveling at 3,500 feet per second, it did the job at 300 yards across a canyon ridge. Thanks again for sharing your handloading and hunting experiences. As a subscriber too, I find this medium to be an additional resource for my own hunting and shooting pursuits. Well, thank you very much. We greatly, greatly appreciate the feedback and the kind words, and there's so many comments like that. I truly think we have the best subscribers on YouTube and the best comment section on YouTube. For every one negative comment, there has got to be 1,000 or maybe even 5,000 positive comments. You guys are awesome. You help each other out, you share information, and you seem to enjoy what we're doing. And as long as people are watching and enjoying it, we're going to keep doing it, because this is a passion of ours as well. And it is a great additional resource to the magazines we publish, Rifle Magazine, Handloader Magazine. If you haven't checked those out, I'd encourage you to do so. Folks seem to really like them, and folks seem to like what we're doing here. So thank you all so much for everybody who comments and watches these videos and listens to me reading them, and just me getting to share a little bit of information with you guys. I genuinely enjoy it. I get to do a job that I genuinely love, and couldn't do that if it wasn't for you guys who watch, who subscribe to Load Data and the magazines, and support the testing and the information we provide. So thank you very much, and I will see you guys in the next episode.